It's my great honor to introduce our distinguished guest, Anonya Chatterjee, who is a senior technical writer at Splunk Incorporated. She focuses on enterprise security products and search, and she's had a varied career where she's been able to be at a high level at IBM and other companies throughout Silicon Valley. And she is going to talk to you today about her experience. And at the end, you'll be able to have time to have some questions for her. So please listen in. And Anonya, I just want to say thank you so much for coming today and joining us. And please take it away.
Thank you, Jake. Good evening, everyone. And thank you all for inviting me to speak and giving up your Saturday evening to hear me talk. So let me jump right into it. When we think of a brand, we usually think about a product or a business. So there are certain goals attached to building a brand that may include creating brand recognition to sell more products, make more money. But maybe we can use the same concept to build a personal brand, which is associated with our personal or professional goals. So instead of marketing a product or a business, what I'm trying to say here is you can market yourself. If we can move on to the next slide. And on that note, let me ask you to ask yourself these three questions. Do you know what a personal brand is? Do you have a personal brand? And are you struggling to define a personal brand? And I wish I could do a quick survey here or a poll that could give me some insight on how you all think about this. But maybe we'll have a chance to talk to some of you and have a conversation at the end of the session during Q&A. So let's delve more into this. We can move on to the next slide. And let me start off with talking about what exactly we mean by a personal brand. So often people think that your personal brand should correspond to your education, your appearance, how long you have worked at a place. In reality, it is really none of those things. And it is what you stand for, what your values are, and what your energy is. And by energy, I do not necessarily mean that you need to speak in a loud, bombastic voice to get people to notice you. It does not have to do anything specific to your role in the company. It does not mean your name, your qualifications, your degree, or your title, whether you're an engineer or a business administrator, or whether you are a digital artist or a manager or a technical writer. So it's none of those things. And this is something I have personally really struggled with when I first came into this country, trying to define what was important to me. Sometimes we get so engrossed in our daily lives, earning that paycheck, taking care of our families, arming ourselves with the degrees that we don't really take the time to think about who we are and what we want to be known for, and really identify what we take pride in. And I felt that it is never really too late to define that personal brand. And I feel that it is something that should encompass you as a whole person. Say, if you are an engineer, you could also be an entrepreneur, you could be an artist, or you could be a blogger. So what I would suggest is ask yourself, what do you bring to the table and how will it contribute to your personal success and your team or your company's mission? You must, I feel, make a calculated effort to define your brand. And though sometimes I do hesitate to use the word marketing in this context, it is exactly what you may want to do. You are trying to sell certain aspects of yourself so that you can achieve certain personal and professional goals. So you are productizing yourself. And don't get upset with me because it's not as bad as it sounds. And I'm definitely not trying to dehumanize anyone or take away their individuality. because really some people have a completely natural sense of self and they don't need to think about it. And some are loud and proud and, they exude charisma and they win people's hearts wherever they go. But most of us are not like that. And we may be introverts and have our own insecurities and vulnerabilities that we do not want to expose to people. And so people like us really need the time to define our personal brand, to manage and curate. And curate is really the key word here. You have to curate aspects of your character. And these aspects of character can include practically anything. Now, if we can go on to the next slide. So you have to figure out what exactly is your superpower. What are your values? What is important to you? So notice that some of these personality traits that I have listed out here, they are not specific to a career or a profession, but they're very fluid. And what I'm trying to say is that a personal brand is about aspects of your personality and character. You're not an actor trying to play a role in a movie, or you're not participating in a promotional event. And this is not what it's about. It's your show, and you have to be authentic and genuine to make it sustainable over the long term. And you have to really resonate with people. So what you should probably do is make a dedicated effort and identify components from your personality that you want to present to make you more recognizable to the world. So, for example, what would your manager know you for? Or what do your teammates know you for? And that way you will be able to increase your influence, your visibility in the company, and your impact on your organization. And I found that when you do that, and when you forget about those promotions, and when you forget about really trying to be someone you are not, and instead you do things that you love, that is really what automatically opens up opportunities. I know that sometimes, developing that precise elevator pitch of what you bring to the table or what makes you memorable among your team and your management is not really easy. And you may know how you want to be defined, but to identify how others perceive you may not be as easy. So if you try and write it down, and this is what I sometimes do, try to jot down and you try to take control of the narrative, and you simultaneously create value for your organization. So ultimately, your personality has to drive your personal brand. And by taking the initiative to define it, you are really putting the best spin to grow yourself in your career. And it's not a construct, and it is something that represents you, right? So when you talk about personal brand, you are not really differentiating between your personality and your personal brand. So it's really, the two have to be integral. And there is, of course, I will say this, there is a fine line that you probably should maintain between the professional representation of your personal brand and the personal brand that you demonstrate to your friends and families. So don't get me wrong here. So for example, how you represent yourself on Instagram or your Facebook may be very different from how you represent yourself on a public Slack channel or on the company Slack channel. And that is a distinction that you must manage, because it is not always safe to be your fully authentic self wherever you go. And for the professional world, you must bring in your personality, but with your polished edges. So consider what you're trying to achieve, what your goals are, who's your audience, and within that environment, how you must set yourself up. And how your colleagues or customers know you has to be slightly different and slightly removed from how your friends know you. So if you can go on to the next slide. So just to reiterate, when I say that you have to develop a personal brand to shine at work or to succeed at work, it does not mean that you give up on your values. So, for example, I'm a person, I care deeply about learning. I care about data ethics. I come from a data analytics company, so that's important to me. I care about reading, and I love to share those values with other people, and that is my personal brand. And that is the energy that I want to share with other people. That's the energy I exude. So if, however, if I suddenly read a book which is really engrossing and I would not want to say it's a political book, I do not want to share those kind of things at work, even though it may be a great book. But there are certain things that you have to keep on the sidelines. And since this is more of a technical audience, say if you are in a technical field, and I would say you are 2 years away from being a top expert at anything and anyone. And anyone who tells you that that's not true is really a liar, because you can pick up things, you can pick up a skill and you can keep developing it, and that can be your personal brand. So if you want to build a personal brand for yourself in a specific field, say it's an evolving technology like Kubernetes, and if you are prepared necessary time to learning, there is no earthly reason why you cannot be known for your expertise in that. So in the engineering world, there are aspects that I feel you can latch onto, and if you commit to spending your personal time learning about it, and say maybe you answer questions every time something related to that comes up, or you volunteer every time when there is a customer issue, then you are the person who knows everything about something. And then even if that product you are working on is unsuccessful, that journey you spent learning about that reveals aspects of your character that will make people rely on you. And that is my personal experience. And I come from a very different field, which had nothing to do with technology. I am a master's in English literature. I was an educator. And coming into technology, it was a hard road. But when I committed to learning about it, I really went all out. But just technical skills, is also not about building a personal brand. And let's not focus on just technical skills. Maybe it's your humor, or maybe that's your personal brand, or maybe your dogs and cats make you memorable. So if you will notice in the title slide of my presentation, I had my 2 cats speaking out. And maybe you do the same for your presentation. So basically what I'm trying to say is there has to be also a humane aspect when you try to define your personal brand. And in your daily communications with people, if you introduce kindness, playfulness, and basically don't take yourself so seriously, don't be afraid, and don't be bland. And if we can move on to the next slide. And this is really centered around a question that a lot of people talk to me about. And this is something that I have also faced in the different places that I have sometimes worked in. And what if you have a personal brand and you really identify with the values that have defined that personal brand, but the community in which you find yourself in does not really gel with that personal brand? You cannot really you are not in an environment which recognizes that personal brand. And there are some companies and there are some professions which will not want you to develop a personal brand. Say, for example, if you are in the Navy or maybe in the intelligence or even in a very traditional technology company, it may be actively discouraged. So often because of established protocols, they don't allow it. And sometimes I've seen first level managers who feel very insecure in allowing their employees that leeway, and actively discourage people from taking the time to engage in activities like presenting conference talks or blogging. And personally, in my opinion, that just displays their immaturity and short-sightedness, because all these avenues that you have of exploring your skills or networking with people, they also benefit the company in the long run, because you bring in that technical expertise, you bring in that people skill back to the company, back to your product. So you must remember that your brand, it can impact you in positive or negative ways. It depends on the environment. But at the end of it, you really need to have a personal brand, and your personal brand is greater than your company. And you have to embrace your strengths. And that is what's going to make you successful. So some companies will let you shine, some companies will muzzle you, and that's just a fact of life. If your values do not align you, align with your company, or if it doesn't align with your job, you must find a place which will allow you to develop that. And in fact, I've found that often changing jobs, when something doesn't really work for you and you feel that it's not right to be at that place, sometimes changing jobs is probably the way to go, because often at the new place, you get that opportunity to rethink your personal brand and craft it to how you want it to be. So if you can move on to my next slide, that will bring me to my next idea.
Can everybody see the slides, by the way? Just raise your hands if you can see the slides. Okay, great. Please keep going. Thank you so much. Sorry, Anonya.
No problem. So this brings me to the next idea that I wanted to talk about. And this is really, why is it important to determine your audience while building your personal brand? And the audience is really important to me as a technical writer. That is the first consideration that I have to keep in mind, because even though I interact with engineers and professional services and the field, they are really not my audience, because I am writing for a product which a customer is going to use. So I have to think like the customer. So similarly, when you are building your personal brand, your audience and who you are directing your personal brand to is very important. And what is also important is that it should align with the company goals. You really cannot go your merry way and define a personal brand and still expect to have a professional life within a particular company. So when you are trying to build a personal brand, I would say always keep the audience in mind. And you may be an individual contributor, you may be a sales engineer, you may be a manager, an executive, and the range of your target audience may be completely different. So it depends on who your audience is. You may be targeting your personal brand to your team or your manager or some other cross-functional organization that you are working with. And if you are a technical person, building your brand may not be the same as, Oprah building her brand. In this case, for you, you need to identify your specific goals. Maybe it is to say, showcase some problem solving abilities that you have or your expertise in a particular domain. And to really demonstrate that, you may want to blog about it so that other people know that this is your brand and this is what you're good at. And you can also probably contribute to some open source projects that are out there, and that will probably leverage your specific skills. So you need to have some specific strategies to build and promote your personal brand. And I would say the way I go about it is I try to tackle the items that scare me the most. So some of you may find it hard to believe, especially because my job is really a customer-facing job. It's very interactive. My biggest fear is public speaking. And what do you get? How do you get over it, right? So you practice. You join a Toastmasters club probably. And sometimes we get so focused on ourselves that when we are trying to build a personal brand, we don't realize that to support our personal brand, we need other people. And if we empathize with people, then they will empathize with us, right? And you need to understand that sometimes other people are struggling. And especially, during these times, that is particularly relevant. So if you can bring in that human touch into your personal brand, say maybe use some self-deprecating humor in your conversations or whatever defines you, just something that affirms your strengths, then that may help you along as well in your career journey. And what I would also suggest is that just take that title, that position, any of those insecurities that you may have, maybe your age, away from your personal brand, and get it all out of your head and do your thing, because it's not about your resume. The most important thing is to take away your own biases, because we stop ourselves before anyone can stop us, and we are our biggest enemies. Of course, there will be those moments where you make those mistakes, those personal growth moments when you have challenged yourselves and when you have failed. But I feel that those help you the most to define your brand. So say, you move across the country, and I've done that. You move across the country for a job, or you have moved countries for a job, or you have decided to study abroad. And, all those experiences, they can be really terrifying and frankly awful. And, at the end of it, you are an adult, you will get through it. And they make you stronger, and they actually contribute to your personal brand. You start realizing what is it that is important to you, what your values are, what is your community, who are the people in your community, and what your ideal workplace should look like. And I'm not saying that, once you define your personal brand and that's it. It's something that evolves over time, and that's because people evolve over time. And once, however, I found that once the foundations are defined, other aspects of that brand see very little change. So, just to conclude, I would just say don't be discouraged if you don't know what it is yet that you are working towards, or what your personal brand is at this point in time. I feel that, especially based on my experiences, a good personal brand that represents you to the outside world uh, authentically, genuinely, it takes a long time to develop. And it takes a lot of life experiences. And you can do it. To do this, you really have to get out of that box and really have some stretch goals for yourself. And there's no right way of doing it. And ultimately, at the end, to be successful and for people to be able to work with you productively, they'll do that only if they like you or if you like them. It's really a mutually symbiotic relationship. And the only way you can find what your personal brand is by making yourself vulnerable. So you have to ask the hard questions from yourself. What do you want? And you have to really get out of that shell and interact with people and identify, what doubles your impact? Why are you here in this world? What can you do to make a difference? How can you bring about a change? And it can be really small. And a lot of it, I totally get it. I totally understand that, a lot of what I'm talking about right now here is really a privilege, because not many of us have that bandwidth to spend that extra time to work on a personal project and to really take that time out to define your personal brand, because it's a lot of labor, it's a lot of time, even to write a blog, even to write an article. But what you must keep in mind is that the personal brand that you define is supposed to be an extension of yourself, and you should not go farther than your life circumstances at any point in time. You should have stretch goals, but you can also postpone certain things. And depending on what you find is important to you at that point in time, maybe take some time off and plan to do it next year. But what is important is that whenever you try and define your personal brand, it has to be intentional, but it also has to be genuine. And that is really what works at the end. So, I mean, I really did not want to talk the entire hour. Just wanted to start you off so that we can probably have a conversation. And I'm open to questions, and I'd be happy to talk to some of you out here today.
Thank you so much, Anonya. So now the floor is open for questions, so feel free to ask questions. Now you can ask questions obviously about technical writing as well, because we have an expert here who certainly knows that. We can ask any questions about any of what was just discussed. So please feel free. I'm going to start off with a question for you, and then maybe others can think of some questions as we go.
Jake, I see something in the, okay, so, that's you. I thought there was a question on the chat.
So, okay, so my question is, so you have this extensive background in communications, and you've helped people identify their personal brands, and in your workplace, you're a senior technical writer for a number of enterprise software products at various large companies. And most of what you have done in your career is very much communications based, conveying a message to people.
Right.
And this is a little outside of the scope of the technical and out of the scope of the personal brand. I have some questions there, but I'm hoping that some of the students have some questions there. From the technical writer perspective, because you're a senior technical writer, and people live and die by understanding what you've written. So take me through, because I don't know that everybody always thinks about communications and the importance of communication and story in terms of technical writing as well. So can you tell me a little bit about that connection from the traditional communications that most of us know to the technical Silicon Valley or global technical writing?
Okay, so let me start off with my title first, right? So when we say a technical writer, people think that I'm probably just writing reams and reams of manuals and books. And the definition of what I do in my profession has actually evolved over the years. So what a lot of people really think of my profession is in terms of content development. And when we talk about information development or content development, it is really like we are judging it in terms of how worthwhile it is for our consumer. So it's not like I am writing a lot of manuals, just writing content which no one is going to be reading. The audience is really of the utmost importance in my case. So let me take you through that journey of really what my profession is, or what I need to do, or what are my job responsibilities. So for example, I work for this product called Enterprise Security. And before that, I used to work in Search, which was one of the pioneering products for the company. But the way I look at my profession is the first stage is interacting with the engineers. And some of these engineers, they are very good technically, but to be able to understand how the customer is going to be interacting with the product is not something that they are very good at. They can provide me lots of information about how the code works, but that's not something that the customer would need to know, right? So really identifying the aspects of that content that he's providing me and figuring out what I need to document so that the end user or the audience is actually going to find it useful. That judgment, that is something that I need to develop as a technical writer. So when I talk about, and let me also bring it to where the personal branding comes in. Now, as a technical writer, I need to be extremely technical because I need to be interacting with the engineers. So when I write about a product, I need to be able to use the product. I need to completely know the product inside out. I need to be able to play with the simulations. So I may not be an engineer, but I should have enough of that technical expertise. So that is my brand. I am doing my research. Before I go to the engineer to ask questions, I am doing all the homework that is necessary to understand the product thoroughly. Then I go interact with him to understand it even further and with more details. Then I interact with the field personnel and see what is their need. Then I may be interacting with the product management, right? So the field will tell me maybe the troubleshooting aspects of the product. What are the issues that they come across when they interact with the customer? And the product management is probably going to tell me how they are trying to, at the end, sell the product. What are they really trying to market, right? So a lot of these cross-functional organizations come into my work, and my interactions with them will define how good of a documentarian I am. And this is where the personal branding again comes in. So it's about communication for me. It is about developing my technical skills, doing my research, uh, being able to interact with people at their level. So this is something that has taken me a lot of time to develop. And I have come a long way from just, reading about Shakespeare and Jane Austen to interacting with engineers. And that is really that journey to develop the personal brand as far as my personal profession is concerned.
Thank you so much. There are a couple of people are here whose hands are raised. And Shelley, I'm going to go to you first. Here we go.
Thank you so much for the insightful event. I think I can totally connect. And thank you for asking that question, because I wanted to first know what is a technical writer actually. What does it do? So thank you for explaining that. And that actually connects with me because I am a lawyer. I have a legal background, and this is my third graduate program. And whatever you just said just made so much sense, because the reason for me doing an MBA is because I want to brand myself as a business lawyer. As an in-house legal counsel, because I worked 6-7 years as an in-house legal counsel, I used to see people think like, you're a lawyer, you don't understand the business. You cannot always think like a lawyer. So knowing your audience is so important. I had to get down to that level and understand my stakeholders. What does the marketing director need? What does the sales director need? So when I was talking to external lawyers, my audience was different. I could use lots of legal terms. But when I had to pass that message on to my business partners, my stakeholders, I had to, get rid of lots of legal jargons and make it as simple and business friendly. And, I have been thriving myself to become a corporate and a business lawyer. And which is why I am doing this MBA, because I didn't even know I was doing all this. I'm trying to probably create a brand for myself where I want to be known as a business-friendly lawyers, because lawyers, in-house legal counsels have that reputation that lawyers are here to stop the business. They don't understand the business. They only understand the law. And I am trying to break that and, build myself as a brand who is a business-friendly lawyer, so that I can position myself in a higher level positions in a company, and where decisions and strategic decisions are made for that long-term sustainability of that organization. Because everything that we do, every product, every marketing campaign that we do, it's going to be strategically decided and in a compliant way so that it can sustain. And halfway through a project, we don't have to cancel or drop the project or call it dead because we missed something, we missed a rule, or we didn't know that we were not even allowed to campaign that way, or that wasn't our audience. So thank you for that. And now I wasn't even aware, but I feel like I am actually working towards building a brand for myself as to be known as a business lawyer. I wasn't aware. So thank you so much.
That's some really good feedback. And sometimes we really do not identify the tools and how to really articulate those words. And even if we are going in that direction, because, if you had asked me about 10 years back, what is a personal brand? I would not know, but I was going in a certain direction, and where my values were clear to me, what I wanted was clear to me, but I could not really articulate it and really define it as such. But to have those tools in your bag and to really know what you are working towards, that is so helpful, because sometimes when you think like that, it gets you into that room where all the stakeholders are. It gets you a place on the table. And that is where you are able to move forward in your career. And that is, those opportunities. Something really difficult turns up, which people who do not have that technical expertise or who do not have those research skills, your manager would probably hesitate to give that project to them, but they would probably think of you because you're known for that skill, right? So it always helps. But yeah, I agree. Sometimes you don't think of it in that way, but if you really consciously try to frame it as such, it just helps.
That's great. Ruchi, I think you're next for your question. So let me unmute you here.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for that. That was really helpful. And as you said, it's a slow process and it doesn't happen overnight, developing a brand, personal brand. So what would you suggest to start with? Like, where should we start?
So first figure out, really take a paper and pen and or your computer and try to come up with some bullet points. What are you good at? What is your strength? And then talk to people around you, your friends, your family, and then try to figure out, okay, what do you think of me? So you may be thinking of yourself as a very humorous person, or you may be thinking of yourself, hey, I'm an expert at Java and C++, and I'm such a great engineer. So when you get feedback from people around you, or even just delve deeper and figure out, identify what your skills are, what your values are, what is important to you, what your personality is like, how do your friends think of you, that is what will help you to identify, okay, these are my core strengths. And then you figure out, okay, this is the career I want. These skills really can be applied in a certain way to that career, right? Because I realized that my skills were uh, writing. And what I do right now is not creative writing. It's not even business writing. It's technical writing. It's a very different kind of writing, but it still has that core component of writing. I did not want to give up on that. And as far as technical skills are concerned, I'm not a coder, but I'm not like, hardcore engineer, but I can understand technical things. So that is a strength. I can articulate and the innards of a product probably better than an engineer can, because I can think of it from the perspective of a customer. So those were my strengths, and that helped me to go into this profession. So if you can really have that self-awareness, develop that over time, and figure out what your skills are, what your strengths are, that will help you move forward with that.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to have Kruti, you're going to go next.
Thank you, Anonya Chatterjee. That was a great insight and a great tip as well. So my question could be a little bit overlapping on what we have already discussed, but I wanted to give you example, and I feel like it is also related to technical writing, because you have to show your understanding and you have to show that you understand the customers, you understand the managers, and you can articulate. So how do you interact with people working at different levels? So what are the key skills? So for example, it is few skills that you think are important to succeed in any field. Given an example, could be talent managers. They have to speak with engineering managers, project managers, technical project managers, senior IT managers, and they have to understand each and every role, the departments, the tools, the products, the core skills, the functional skills. So this is something you have to do as well when you're speaking with the users and the customers. So what are the key things to keep in mind to create your own brand? So sometimes I feel like people in this field are not taken seriously just because they don't have that title.
Yes, so I think that goes back to my original point. Really know your audience when you are interacting with someone. So in my job, I interact with a lot of different kinds of people all over the organization. And this involves marketing, this involves QA, engineering, product management, program management, customers directly, and some of them can be really harsh, especially when they're providing feedback, right? And one of the biggest issues that I feel, and the worst kind of evidence is you do not do your research when you are interacting with someone. If I go to the engineer and just get him to do my job, or if without knowing anything about the product, I just go to him and say, can you please explain what's going on here? He'll give you a demo, but you are not in a position to ask the right questions because you have not done your research. You have not played around with the product, right? So you have to do your homework. Similarly, if you are interacting with a customer, know that your bread and butter comes from that customer. So he may be very harsh and abusive. I'm not saying that is something that is a good thing, but often when you respond, so when you respond politely, people tend to back off, and then you tend to have a productive, interactive discussion. So for example, I was just telling Jake, for every topic in our discussion, in our documentation, we have a feedback form. And this is something that customers use to provide feedback on our documentation. And they do not realize that there is a real person in the back end who is actually reviewing those feedback. And they can be really, for lack of a better word, really obnoxious at times, right? But we commit to responding to that feedback within 24 hours. We are pretty polite. And when they realize that there is a real person at the back, they tend to engage in a very productive way. So it solves the problem. Similarly, if you are interacting with your manager, know that he's probably not going to be as technical. His goals are very different from what an engineer's goals are. He doesn't really care about the innards of a product. He knows whether the project is going to be completed at a certain time or not. What are the roadblocks? Preferably come up to him with answers rather than questions. So you are there to make his life easier. You are not there to create problems, right? And if you are going to pose a question, try to come up with alternatives. So there are solutions out there that he can think about, and then you have a discussion about. So basically, just really know your audience, do your homework, and there are all these soft skills, of course, which will also come with experience that you would have to use to interact with different people at different levels in the organization.
Thank you. That's great insight and a great tip. I'll definitely try to implement. Appreciate
Thank you, Kriti.
Wonderful. We have another question from Sherry. Sherry, did you have a question?
No.
Oh, not Cherry, Sherry. I'm sorry.
No, I just thinking, so if like we're going to interview and the interviewer asks, like normally when they ask like what is your like personality, I figure that is the time when we try to like branding ourselves. I'm just not sure when it's in the formal interview, we should be more focusing on like describing our personality or like the achievement we've done. So just a little bit, I'm still thinking about this.
So when you're talking about an interview, usually, I don't know whether you have come across this, people do ask, what are your strengths? Basically what they are really asking is, okay, you are trying to basically sell yourself to the company as a possible candidate for a particular role, right? So when you talk about, of course, you can bring your personality in because those are your strengths, but then provide the evidence as to why you think you have those strengths, or how do you demonstrate those strengths in your previous roles or in your previous experiences. Why do you think that is your strength, right? Say if you're saying, I'm so great at Java, well, maybe even if you don't have previous experience, you probably did a project using that, right? And you should be able to talk about the challenges in the project and how you use your strengths to overcome some of those challenges, right? So always when you can bring your personality, maybe you are great at working with people, so you are very collaborative in your approach, right? So if you can talk about that with specific examples to maybe classroom experiences, job experiences, your previous job experiences, that's what they look for, because no one has a lot of experiences right when they are starting off in their career. Because I remember my first interview was with IBM and I had absolutely no technical experience. My only experience was that I had written a research paper on Indian literature, um, on Indian literature. I don't even remember the title of that right now. But anyway, I had written that research paper, but I used that to show that I can actually write. And though it's a different kind of writing, I can do research, I can follow style guides, and that's what helped me get an internship. So just providing that evidence and how you make those connections between your various activities and your strengths is what's going to get you there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Ian, you're up next.
Cool. Thank you so much for the talk earlier. I guess I have two questions, although I suppose they're kind of related. What would you say as an engineer? So I'm for my background, I'm a software engineer.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say is the biggest mistake engineers make in communicating? So I've communicated with other engineers, and sometimes we don't come across as personable, or it's very like, oh, black and white. It's like, oh, it has to be this. Oh, that's dumb. Why would you do that? And I guess the second question is, as an engineer, how could I communicate to better improve your workflow? Because I imagine that getting better at improving your workflow would mean getting better at communicating as well.
Okay, so there are two aspects. So an engineer communicating with an engineer, I usually don't find that a problem with them. Like, they are able to communicate really well because they basically just work with the product and they know what they are interested in. They have shared goals. When communicating with, say, a technical writer, you're not really communicating with me. You have to start thinking like a customer, and that is what's going to help you to communicate with me, because I'm thinking like a customer. You have to figure out what is it that the customer would need to use your product, the product that you are creating. Are they going to be interested in looking at the code base? Are they going to be interested in just really delving deep into the concept of a particular feature? Or are they going to just want to maybe they just want to accomplish a task? They don't care about the product. They have a problem. They want to solve that. What is it about your product that is going to make or help them solve that problem? So if you think like that, that is the exact information you are going to provide me. So there is this concept of a learning objective. So whenever you think that, say, I come to you and I come to you to discuss a product feature. And the way I will be thinking about it is, as a, say, systems administrator, I want to accomplish this so that I can do this, right? So that's a learning objective. So when you are communicating with me, think of what information you are giving me in that frame. I'm doing this to accomplish this, and that is what it is. I really don't need to know the code base.
Do you mind if I
that
follow up?
helped.
Yeah. Do you mind if I follow up really quickly? So how do I know if I'm doing it effectively? Like, I imagine if I knew what I was doing already, in my head, I'll be like, yeah, this is a good way of expressing it. But if I'm not there, how would I know?
Okay, a better way to probably put it is take out the concept of feature, where, like, when we talk about documentation, a lot of people think about it, oh, I have completed documenting this feature. No one cares about how many features your product has. The customer doesn't really care how many features it has. What does he care about? He cares about how that feature is going to accomplish him to do a certain task, right? So think of it in terms of task rather than features. So when you are coming to me, if you say that, and I think you may be doing that, and don't say that I am going to talk to you about XYZ feature, rather talk to me in terms of, okay, we can really help the customer do this if we use this feature, and this is how the UI works, and these are the features. And then maybe I will provide you some feedback, because it's an interactive process. I will provide you some feedback saying that, hey, the text on the UI doesn't seem right. This is misleading. This is not good from the perspective of design, right? Because you may think that it is so intuitive and obvious, but I may think that, hey, why are we jumping through multiple screens to be able to accomplish a task? And then that is where the design may itself change. When I say my job is collaborative, I also work with UX designers. So if you think like a customer, you will actually be able to design your product better, and you will be able to communicate with me better as well.
Anonya, I have a question related to this. I think, some of what we talked about earlier is when you're communicating with people, part of it is understanding what people do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And understanding who these people are in the pipeline of whatever process you're working, right, Ian?
Right.
So I think part of that is what Anonya is talking about, is that, she's talking with the UX designer, she's talking with an engineer. The engineer needs to know what the UX designer is doing and needs to know what the technical writer is going to do. So I think a lot of it is understanding how to communicate with each other.
Right.
And having an understanding of how an engineer normally thinks, right? Mm-hmm. And you being self-aware already, and you being self-aware that you want to make improvements is one step in that direction. Part of it is actually maybe asking members of your team, hey, am I conveying what's helpful to you, right? Mm-hmm. Is this something, is there a better way that we process, how are you looking at it? I think Anonya is telling you basically her experience in terms of working with a lot of engineers, often that feature first issue that comes to mind. And that's great insight. But your self-awareness, I think, already gets you started in the right direction if you're not already doing it.
Right.
Yeah.
That's spot on.
Does anybody else have any other questions? I know we fired a lot of questions at you, and you've answered them all. So great work. Does anybody else have any questions? I'm going to give a 5-second count here, and we're gonna see. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I think. Well, first of all, Anonya, I want to say thank you very much, because we have this class and we appreciate you coming here. You have given us your time on your Saturday night, so we certainly appreciate what you've done here. From the bottom of my heart, I appreciate your time. I enjoyed speaking with you. You come with a great amount of knowledge, and we very much appreciate you imparting that on us and understanding our personal brand. And how to be able to maneuver that and develop is very, very critical. So thank you.
Thank you, Jake. I really enjoyed my time here and meeting everyone. And it's really wonderful for you guys to come and listen on a Saturday evening. So I appreciate that as well. And I hope to see you again all in the future.